Hello everyone, welcome to Unlog IAS Current Affairs Analysis for 3rd December 2019. These are the articles for the day and the sources are mentioned here. The first article for the day is taken from the Live Mint and it is titled The Battle of Gender Equality in an Era of Machismo Politics. This is in the context of the Beijing Plus 25 review, which is a conference held on gender equality in 1995. Now let us have a brief background on what this conference is about and what are the promises made by various countries on the aspect of gender equality. Before trying to understand what this Beijing conference is all about, let us understand what is the idea of gender equality. Now, let us go back to the founding UN Charter, which said that men and women should be treated on par, and this has led to various UN officials, especially the female officials within the United Nations and leaders of women movements on the global stage, who tried to turn this principle into action, and this culminated into the first women conference. Now, before I proceed further, let me tell you that the Beijing conference is the fourth such world conference on women. Now, it is your duty to go back and do some research on where did the first three happen and what are the outcomes. So, what was the agenda of these conferences? Basically, it is about an all-round development of women, whether it is in the sphere of social rights, social equality, women's education, equality in political participation and decision making. All these aspects were very thoroughly debated, and the conference also acknowledged that women need to participate in all areas of human activity, not just those areas that relate to gender. Now, at the time of 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women, reproductive health became the major issue on which all the countries felt that there is a need for a consensus. Issues like safe motherhood, child and infant health care, family planning, sexual diseases, reproductive health issues, all this at a time of population explosion, the world felt that there should be a decision making power that should be imparted to women to control this issue. Now, the present article is trying to identify the fundamental challenges for making progress on these initiatives. The author identifies three main reasons: fundamentalism, chauvinistic nationalism, and macho leadership as the three biggest challenges for all the political activists engaged in ensuring gender equality. There is a threat of increased surveillance and targeting by these fundamentalist forces, especially when they're leading the governments across the world, that is making a talk on gender equality very tough. From the examination perspective, details about the UN Conference on Women is very important and you have to do some background work on that. Now, coming to the main question as to why gender equality is an answer for all the sustainable development goals, over the last few days we have had many articles in the context of national health profile and how empowering women actually helped achieve better indicators on infant mortality rate and other issues. Now, what is the impact of empowering women? Or rather, what is the idea of empowering women? See, basically, when we are talking about women empowerment, we have to focus on their education, giving them enough skills, ensuring that they have a proper job, and most importantly, after they even have economic strength and economic independence, sometimes they do not have the option of spending in a patriarchal setup. So, in a society which runs on the choices made by men, ensuring that women also have a choice to spend the money they earn in the way they want also ensures welfare of the society, as proved by certain empirical studies. An independent, empowered woman will take care of the entire family, and this is not just a empirical study, but a rather I can say that it is a statistical study, as recently proved in many NSSO surveys as well. in order to achieve better outcomes on these sustainable development goals, we have to make sure that civil society organizations which have been a major part of this women's movement are made partners in development rather than isolating them. In the past few years, probably there is an increase in violence against women, or maybe it is a case of increased reporting by media regarding the violence of women. Even UN special report on violence against women spoke about how globally 1 in 3 women still face violence. So it is time that the world recognizes the impact empowering women can have on societies. In this context, try to answer this question. The second article for the day is titled "In Telecom, Time to Send the Right Signals," and this is taken from the Hindu. This is in the context of the challenges faced by the telecom sector and presents an interesting anecdote on how the telecom sector has evolved over a period of time in India. So this article begins with the early 1990s and traces its development to the present day, where we are talking about new technologies like Internet of Things and 5G. So how did the telecom policy evolve? The article says that in the early 1990s, the affordability of new telephone connections is very low because of the average revenue per user to just break even was as high as 1250 rupees per month. Now that was an average salary for a middle class person, below middle class person during the early 90s. So there is no way you can imagine having a telephone in that scenario. Now how did the government try to address this challenge? It brought out a new telecom policy in 1999. This new telecom policy emphasized on increasing the access of telephone. Previously, there was a waiting period of nearly an year or sometimes many years as well. So, to ensure that telephone is accessed on demand, 1999's policy said that there should be access to telephone on demand by the year 2002. And also, the new telecom policy of that time ensured that cellular mobile service providers and fixed service providers, radio paging service providers got an entry into market and ensured that all the entry barriers are cleared. Now cut to the present day, how did the telecom sector grow? Basically, the logic behind the growth of this sector was it's a virtuous cycle of demand, and increasing competition led to more and more investments to gain the markets. Now what is the result is that we have pushed down prices to levels that is not seen elsewhere in the world. India has some of the cheapest telecom services in the world. Now this is a caveat because we arrived at this stage because we have been pushing down the average revenues per user, which is called ARPU. Average revenue per users have come down significantly in a market that is presently dominated by 1 or 2 players. So this article says that in order for a sustainable business, you have to ensure more and more players enter into the market, and you have to create a level playing field. Otherwise, the danger that a business as usual approach is that all the existing players, for example, if you take the case of Airtel or Jio, they are only focused on ensuring that they acquire the consumer market and later focus on making revenue. That is simply an unsustainable way of doing business in India. Because if you look at history, India has always priced its auctions very high. In 1995, when the first telecom auctions took place, the financial bids were unbelievably high, and even the government on its part charged high spectrum fees and license fees without even understanding the basic fundamental point that an average Indian cannot afford such expensive services. So they eventually understood that we are not going to make money, and this has pushed the telecom sector into a kind of an abyss. So in 1999, when the Vajpayee government came into the scene, they scrapped this license fee and introduced a revenue share model. However, at that particular point of time, he was worried because he was accused of selling the country and causing huge loss to the revenue, because there is a socialist tinge that is always associated with economy, and there is a fear of capitalism in the country. But you have to realize that unless and until such hard measures are taken, there is no growth in telecom sector, or to that matter any business in general. A few years down the line, when everything was perfect, somewhere around 2003, 2004 and 2005, the government realized that the GSM service providers, namely Airtel, Vodafone or the erstwhile Hutch, were happy confining themselves to the urban markets, and the government's objective, that is actually seen in Telecom policy of 1999, to reach out to rural areas was not being taken care of by major players in the markets like Airtel and Vodafone or the erstwhile Hutch. So it was around 2007 when the government saw this caveat and found ways to give GSM licenses using primarily revenue sharing method. So many new telecom service providers like Reliance, Tata entered into the market and introduced the revolutionary per second billing, which significantly brought down the costs of calling and other telecom services as well. What later ensued was the growth of sector normally taking its course, of course embroiled by the 2G spectrum case, where there is an allegation of corruption in the form of revenue foregone by the government for vested interests. And the telecom sector went through all these phases. Later the 3G technology came into the picture, and now 4G technology, which is considered a high speed internet service, was actually dominated by a few players. Reliance Jio, which is the dominating factor which changed the face of the industry right now, has taken 4 years of time to acquire the 4G technology, ensured that its standards are placed properly, and bought it out in 2016. Now it is exactly at this point of time the Supreme Court has passed a verdict on a 2001 case which was in dispute in the Telecom Tribunal. Like I have said, after 1999, when the Vajpayee government came to power in 2001, they made an agreement with the telecom service providers that they have to share their revenue. I have already mentioned that point, instead of having a license fee. Now this was a point of contention from 2001 itself. The government says that the companies are liable to pay revenue share not just on telecom but all the revenues of the company. Now what is this all other revenues of the company? Where do they come from? They come from sale proceeds on handsets, renting of the towers, infrastructure sharing, and even on dividend incomes that come from any investment. Now the point is, the industry is facing a crisis because of a dominant player. Now the court imposed fines to the tune of 86,000 crores on both combined Vodafone and Airtel. If these companies are made to pay such huge penalties on adjusted gross revenue, they are almost at a stage of exiting from the telecom game completely, and this is not a good sign for the economy and telecom sector in particular, because market principle is that whenever there is competition, it functions efficiently. Now if you are removing Airtel and Vodafone completely from the market, that gives the entire market to Reliance Jio, which is not sustainable way of doing a business, and it will not meet the government objectives in the long run. Now telecom sector's growth is very important, because in order to reap the benefits of digital India, there should be a proper telecom policy which ensures competition. So it is in this interest that India should waive off this huge penalties and settle this case once for all. Now in the age of artificial intelligence and 5G, there is a need for new policy, and we need to ensure that new elements of the changing technological world are incorporated within this policy to usher a digital revolution in India. In that context, try to answer this question. The next article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Taking Stock of the Anti-AIDS Fight. This is regarding the Sustainable Development Goal 3.3, which aims at ending AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria by 2020, or rather 2030. Now, with regards to the global fight against AIDS, the main organization would be dealing with is UNAIDS. Now, UNAIDS, in order to ensure that this Sustainable Development Goal is achieved, has come up with a 90-90-90 strategy by 2020. That is, it aims at ensuring 90% of those living with HIV will know their HIV status. 90% of those who know their status will receive sustained antiretroviral therapy, and 90% of those receiving such therapy should ensure viral suppression. That is the 90-90 target set by 2020 but not 2030. Now this article is regarding whether we are on the road to ensure that this target is being met. We have to understand that we had phenomenal success in the reduction rate with HIV infections. Thanks to the multi-stakeholder approach followed across the world, we had support from health systems, we had NGOs fighting for this, civil society organizations, and multilateral governments engaging together to fight this common problem. To put things into perspective, we have had a reduction of 37% of HIV new infections between 2000 and 2018, and morbidity fell down by 45%, with 13.6 million saved due to antiretroviral therapy. Specific reasons for the success also include attacking the stigmas which are prevalent in the society by generating awareness campaigns, and according to a recent UNAIDS support, of the 38 million persons now living with HIV, 24 million are already receiving the antiretroviral therapy. Despite all these successes, we have certain huge surge in many countries in the new infection rates. That brings us to the problem that we are not on the path to achieve the target set by UNAIDS. That is the 90-90-90 target. We are not on the path to achieve that. Only 19 countries are on track to achieve this 90-90-90 targets. Now, surprisingly, it is not Asia or Africa but Europe which is seeing a rise in AIDS cases. As many as 95% of the new infections are coming from Europe. When we are talking about AIDS and indicators, we have the key definition to decide what will be the prevalence. So we consider new HIV infections per 1000 uninfected population, and we see the variance according to age, sex and key population. Now you have to understand what the meaning of this key population in the policy parlance. This key population basically comprises the vulnerable section, like men who have sex with men, people who use injected drugs, people in prisons and other closed settings, and also vulnerable people like transgenders or sex workers and their clients are all under the risk of this HIV virus. Now in Europe, as I've already told you, 95% of the new cases are reported from Europe, and most of these cases are from key populations. So there is a need to target these key populations to contain the new infection rate which are surging. What is the reason for resurgence of this virus? First one is a sense of complacency, because since we have achieved so much, there is a possibility that many governments felt we have done enough, but we have to realize that as new set of populations come up, there should be a renewed vigor with which we should be carrying out the awareness campaigns. And as you can see, 95% of the infections in Europe are amongst the key population, that is the vulnerable section. So there is a need for ensuring access to contraceptives and increasing awareness amongst its people. Now, there are also other issues uh, other than the spread of new infections, like those vulnerable adolescent girls who are victims of sexual exploitation by older men are also victims of new HIV infections. There is another problem wherein improved survival rates created new problems in the form of cardiovascular diseases and infectious diseases such as tuberculosis. It has been proven that they can coexist, and there should be a separate strategy which can deal with both tuberculosis and malaria simultaneously. Now, this brings us to the point of what is the situation of India with this respect. Though we had tremendous success in bringing down the mortality rates and pre-exposure prophylaxis and post-exposure prophylaxis, and during even cultural practices like male circumcision, we even succeeded in reducing the mother to child transmission due to drug treatment. However, we cannot afford to relax now because we have to learn from the experiences seen in Europe. We have to keep on continuing our awareness programs and uh, retroviral therapies to ensure that AIDS is a thing of past. Right now, vaccines are still in developmental stage, and unless and until communities and civil society organizations come together and work with the government, AIDS is still a pandemic. In this context, try to answer this question. The last article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled A New Mould for Mauritius. Now, before starting this article, please go back to your map and have a look at where Mauritius is. What is the hemisphere, whether it is in southern hemisphere or is in northern hemisphere? Please try to have a look. What is the closest city to equator? And certain map questions can be asked in this context. You can also try to Google about Vanilla Islands, which is a larger group which comprises Mauritius as well. What are the other islands in this group? Try to have answers for these questions. Now, coming back to the article, this is regarding the India and Mauritius relationship and what are the various factors that India should focus upon to have a strong relationship with Mauritius. What is its strategic significance? What is its economic significance? These are the points that you have to focus on. Traditionally, India viewed at Mauritius as a avenue for engaging with the Indian diaspora. Quite understandable because we have a significant number of Indians present there due to the slave trade carried out by Europeans during the times of imperialism. Now, this country has witnessed a transition from being just another slave island to a economically independent tourist destination as well as a strategically very important country. Now, considering its location and the fact that Diego Garcia Islands, which was with Mauritius previously, now holds the largest naval base of US. This signifies the importance of Mauritius in strategic angle. Now, if you want to understand the geo-economic significance of uh, Mauritius, you have to understand that it is a part of African Union, it is a part of Indian Ocean Rim region, it is a part of Vanilla Islands with which India engages bilaterally. So there are many multiple forums that India can be a partner of just by associating itself with Mauritius. So India can make Mauritius the fulcrum of India-African relationship. India must invest in education, healthcare. It must invest in infrastructure, especially if we can make Mauritius the hub for our tourism, for making it the hub of flights to and from Indian cities, we can ensure that our tourism potential can be boosted. And we can also make Mauritius a hub for information and technology development, and Mauritius has always been asking for access to educational facilities of Indian universities and especially technical universities like IITs. India can address that issue. We have to make Mauritius a partner of our growth story and grow together to attain certain strategic advantage in our strategic backyard. That is the question that we have to address when we are engaging with Mauritius.